I wanted to make and share a brief video on my planning thoughts with the rain and current conditions that we're facing and what the next week looks like it brings. Everybody's been pretty reserved, and there hasn't been a lot of crop put in bad conditions. So it's always good to see. The calendar date seems kind of late because it was so nice in the later part of March, and it makes it feel like it's later than the calendar date actually suggests. Looking at the rainfall map, pretty much all of us are in the same boat, with the exception of southern Michigan and the area up along the lake, which in the past has had terrible planting conditions most springs. So, kind of glad to see them have a nice one for a change. But most of us are in the same boat, so not a lot has been done across the area. So there is that. So I wanted to look at each crop and really look at the impacts of what we do and the decisions we make. So to me, in corn, to summarize it up, planting conditions definitely trump calendar dates. So not a real big fan of planting by a certain date. I really love conditions. It's getting corn even out of the ground and not creating root issues is really the big part of getting a good stand established. I actually went back more so for my own peace of mind. I went back and looked through all of our plot data by year the last 6 years and looked what was the average or median planting date for both planting, harvest, and then what was the yield and moisture. Really, I wanted to see how 2019 compared to everything. So you look at that median planting date. We did plant a lot of plots later that year, as you would expect. But look at the harvest date. We really didn't harvest them that much later. And then when you look at the far column, the moisture column, it was a little wetter, but it really wasn't that dramatic. And the yield was off just a little bit. So we could still have a reasonably normal harvest. A lot of times when we start with these conditions where it's wet, the pattern reverses, and we tend to be hot and dry throughout the summer. So, we've got a lot of experience planting later and still getting a pretty good crop out of it. So, other years I can look where we actually planted pretty timely, and the yields, they weren't all that spectacular or all that abnormally better. So, just looking at 2023 conditions late in the season give us a really late harvest window. Although we had great yields, we still had a lot of moisture to contend with too there. So just looking at our data, just looking at plots in general over 6 years, the calendar date really is not that important of a factor. So, looking at early and late hybrids, we aren't near to this stage yet, but people always ask, when should I think about pulling the plug on what I had planned as far as full season hybrids? I looked at all that plot data I just shared, all them 6 years. I looked at all the plots planted after May 15th, and then looked for plots that had both full late season corn in it and early season corn in the same plot, and then broke it out by moisture and yield. And what I found was it was true every year but one that the yield was quite a bit better to the tune of 10.4 bushels. So quite a big yield advantage sticking with that full season hybrid into the tail end of May and even the first week of June. And the surprising part to me, looking at the yield, those full season hybrids, you're getting quite a bit more yield, but they were only a point and a half, or a little over a point and a half wetter. So not a lot of moisture difference, which that's what we would expect with corn, because as we go later, it tends to early itself up, and you don't see that moisture spread. So that was a good summary. I was glad I pulled that just for my own peace of mind. I know I can really stick with the package I wanted to plant clear into the first week of June without really thinking about doing anything else. We actually have models that suggest the same thing. I looked at three different hybrids here: 859, 1383, and 1742. Just looking with different scenarios, what our moisture predictions would be for a fall. So I looked for at different planting dates or different frost dates and above normal growing degree unit accumulations, which I had mentioned earlier. With these late planting windows, we tend to have above normal GDU accumulations those summers. And what you see is just what our data suggested. So we can stick with them full season hybrids. They're not going to be that much wetter. Just looking at these three for a June 1st date with a frost or a heavy freeze date in November 1st, which that's been pretty common the last couple of years. You're looking at 24% for 859, 1383, 26%, and 1742, which planted that late. You think, boy, that thing stuff's really going to be wet. It's coming in at 29, so not a lot of difference between the hybrids, just like our data would suggest. So corn, really the calendar date thing, it's pretty easy to ignore it when you look at all the data that you present to it. And experience has shown too that good conditions have always out yielded basically out yielded planting in muddy conditions. Once you mess up that root zone, that's a problem you got to live with the whole year. Flipping the script over to beans, our calendar date is very important for beans. There's no way to get around it. I don't really want to plant in terrible conditions, but if I'm going to push the envelope, I definitely want to do it with beans. Really, the thing with beans, we can do some adjustments in our management. So when I have to plant late, my goal is to have as many nodes out there per acre as I can. So I can increase my population as the weeks go along, and I can't plant and make up some of that difference. So I just want to have more plants out there to get more nodes to harvest sunlight. So I've got three different planter widths here. So kind of my thoughts on what I would do with populations. So this up to the first full week of May there, I'm going to do my standard planting rates, and I'm going to figure my what I'm going to have attrition between both how the planter plants and how soybeans self-select naturally. We're going to lose some, so I've got a target planting date for each of them. As you can see, for each of them, as the weeks go by, you just adjust the populations up just a little more to give you more nodes per acre. That can make up for a lot of the light capture that we're missing out with not having that early planting date. So there is a good way to manage around it in soybeans, and calendar date is important there, but with management, we can help accommodate some of that. Excuse me. So in conclusion, corn, keep waiting for those good conditions. The calendar date is just not that important. Purdue has a lot of the same stuff summarized. They show the same thing. We can have great yields even planted toward the end of May. So don't mess up your root zone. Start out creating yourself a problem. Be patient and really try to wait for good conditions. Beans, you can push the envelope some, and we can adjust populations to help harvest light. So if you do have to push the envelope or feel like you got to do something, try to do it with beans. They're definitely a lot more forgiving. So if you have any questions with this, feel free to give me a call. Thank you.